Okay, well, the wind has died down. We still have a beautiful sunset over there, but you're getting a nice, decent view there anyway. We're back to the travel hacks, travel fundamentals. I don't know. Things that I think will help make your next trip easier, better, whatever. Next time you get on a plane, you want to maximize that time. Um, because it's not just your time strolling around a Walmart or a Costco. So we're on to number three. Number three is food, fasting, and sleep. So number one was planning and the different aspects of planning that I don't really see people talk about that really made an impact on my travel. And then number two, I went over expectations and how important it became for me to really understand and actively manage expectations, and how big of an impact that's had on my trips is, you know, beyond measurement. Just because it's fundamentally changed everything about my trips. Is actively controlling, actively, very actively thinking about and setting my expectations and managing them. It's had a huge effect. Now, fasting, food, and sleep. This is something that I have learned. This was learned the hard way. Food and sleep is obvious, right? The more sleep you get, the better, right? But I'm the type of person. I'm someplace fabulous. I don't want to waste time sleeping when I could be out doing. And like, that's been one of my big challenges with YouTube is I don't want to waste time editing when I could be out doing. I could be out doing this, and sitting in a computer. I enjoy editing when I've got nothing else to do, but usually I'm in places like this that are fabulous and I want to be out doing things. Um, so it's a struggle for me every day. But food and fasting, this was one that came out of left field for me. I was working on getting healthier. I was, doing what I thought was healthy, and I wasn't losing any weight. I went abroad. I still wasn't having any luck, and then I started fasting. And just to put it into perspective, 10 years ago, I was a guy. I was having stomach problems and all these things, and I would carry Spam singles in my pocket or some beef jerky or something. I would always have something to eat to calm the acid in my stomach. This is hilarious. Two people fighting with horns over a parking space. And we're even getting a helicopter. Today is like bonus day. Or maybe it's a motorcycle. I can feel that thump, thump, thump. Maybe I should have stayed inside. Totally lost my train of thought there. Food and fasting, putting things into perspective. I was the guy, I would carry Spam in my pocket or beef jerky or something. So I always had something to eat and quell that acid. I was always getting hangry, whether people around me knew it or not. I was always like, had a food plan. I always had a plan for food, and it was often. Um, and then and I knew, I'd always been trying to lose weight and struggling with it, and it was always a frustrating thing because I was going off like 1980s or 1990s idea, zone or this or that. I never got into Atkins. It didn't make sense to me. Now it all makes sense to me. But what did I learn from traveling about food and fasting that really changed my travel? And that's what I want to talk about. I used to be very concerned about getting on a plane or a bus and not having food to eat and not having, you know, foods that wouldn't upset my stomach, not having this or that. And I had, medicine for my stomach I had to take on a schedule. I was always carrying antacids. It was just a miserable existence compared to now. Now, once I got used to fasting and I got comfortable with it, going to bed hungry, it's a normal thing for me, right? Going hungry is a normal thing for me. It doesn't last. And I have little tips and tricks that I use to mitigate that hungry. I never get hangry. I, you know, and what it did is it opened up my ability to walk away, which is one of my key principles about, being happier, is just walk away from situations I don't like. So if it's a restaurant and I'm hungry, I can eat or I can walk away. Do I like what I see? Do I like the location? Do I like this? If I don't, I just walk away. And that's one of the reasons I love Japan is I could go into any 7-Eleven and buy some eggs or whatever, boiled eggs or whatever, and have some food, right? If I needed it or I wanted it. And that was kind of my downfall too, because they have these little, sorry, I got my notepad, but they have these little triangles of rice with really yummy stuff inside them, like salmon. And so, and they're cheap, so I'd be like, oh, let me get one of these. Oh, let me get one of these, like every 5 minutes. And you're eating that rice and that salmon, just destroys all that hard work. So when I left here, you know, 18 months ago, I was at 120 kilos, and now I'm back and I'm over 135. Well, maybe 130. Maybe I'm down to 135 now. Fingers crossed. We'll see. But not a good thing, because I carried that habit from Japan forward with me, where I wasn't as regimented with my eating. I was still maintaining a lot of the fasting times. So, I never slipped back into that hungry, or I have to have food, or I have to have a food plan. But it made things like getting on a plane so much easier. And once I learned to cut sugar, specifically soda, once I learned to cut sugar and soda, it made my life so much easier and happier. I don't get stressed out about it. If I see a tart, I love the little fruit tarts. So if I see a tart and I want a tart, I can have a tart. I don't get compulsive about it. And here's the thing, is I don't develop expectations about it now. I don't think like, oh, I'm going to get this food and it's going to be so fabulous. Going back to the last video, right? I don't have these expectations about food. Now, once in a while about a steak, yeah, maybe, but usually, I don't have that false expectation of that food's going to be so fabulous because I'm waiting on that food. I'm planning on that food. This food is why I'm here, right? None of that. Food is more and more, as I get into this, food is becoming something I just got to eat, right? And when I really got into fasting, that was the biggest problem I ran into. Is I was trying to do 2 meals. I was trying to do between 10 and like 4 to 6, and I wouldn't get that last meal. And if I didn't get that last meal, come 10 o'clock when I'm trying to go to bed, now I'm starving, right? Super hungry. And that was before I learned other techniques to deal with that. But now it's, that's not even a big issue. But that was the problem I slipped into, and I got back on fasting very hardcore recently. I cut all carbs for like 3 days. I've had a few cheat days here, but I'm going back to that, no carbs or low carbs, and the fasting. But the funny thing is when I'm in the middle of that fasting, I forget to eat. I don't get hungry. I lose that sensation. So think about when you're traveling and you're out and about, and do you want to be bothered by, I need some food? Do you want to be interrupted by, I need some food? Do you want that to be controlling your thought process? Let me see what I got in my notes here. Now, sleep. Sleep is, one of those things, going back to the planning phase, when you get down to the nuts and bolts, the details of your planning, I found making a sleep plan for my vacation is probably another very important thing. There's a lot of studies about going to bed at the same time every night is very important to your health, and there's a lot of benefits to it, and I've realized those benefits. I've felt those benefits. I can't statistically point to it, but I can tell you when I very regimentally went to bed at the same time every night for weeks and months, I felt a lot better. And that may be placebo, it may be scientific, I don't care. I felt better. That's all I need to know. But when you're traveling, that's not always the case, right? And so I make sure that I have a proper plan. And for me, going to bed is hard because I can always go do something. There's always a shiny object I can chase. There's always that thumb can always scroll. I can always be researching something, right? It's hard. It's very hard for me to go to bed just because I want to be doing things, right? And the shitty thing is the more I fast, the more energy I get. And so it becomes even harder. But traveling specifically, it is very important to get your sleep. And, I mentioned this in one of the other videos, is the better rested you are, the better you could write memories into the long-term storage, and the more vivid those memories will be. According to all these chuckleheads I've listened to online, I've got no science behind me. I'm just a guy with some gray hair, beard, in my beard, my camera, and a lot of opinions. So, if I say something like that and you don't believe me, start researching it. And a lot of this, comes out of Huberman Lab, or people, when you're watching Huberman Lab, YouTube likes to put up a lot of people just like him with similar credentials on the right side, and so you'll spur off and find more of those. But what I found it to be true, is the more rested I am, the better my memories lock in. That's about it for sleep, fasting, and food. One other thing here, though, I'm going to touch on. I didn't make a full topic of video about health, but that should probably be its own video. I'm probably not going to do, but hopefully you can watch these four and kind of take this mindset or this different view of things and apply it to health and travel. But I will say, when it comes to food, there's a lot of people on the internet right now talking about how when you eat sugar, like a piece of bread turns to sugar, your body sees it as sugar, or a donut, or just sugar in your coffee, how it suppresses your immune system for a specific amount of time, or period of time. So when you're thinking about getting on a plane in a condensed closed tube with a bunch of people, or on a bus or on a ferry with a bunch of people in a closed tight space from different parts of the world with different bugs, and you're going to get a soda, or you're going to get a piece of bread, or you're going to get a sandwich, that might not be the smartest move. And there's a whole other thing, I could do a whole series of videos like this on little stupid things I do to keep myself healthy, and how I respond when I do get sick. But that's just something to think about with food, is what foods are you eating, and how does it affect your stomach? How does it affect your immune system? How does it affect your mentality? If you eat too much sugar, a lot of people get in that more emotional, or more, they make, how do I put this politely? I was going to say they make stupid fucking decisions. Sorry. When you eat a lot of sugar, you tend to make more impulsive decisions, is the word I was looking for. But, when you eat a lot of other things, it really clears your mind, calms your mind, relaxes your mind, and keeps it on a more stable, course, a more even keel, less emotional, less up and down. When you eat a lot of sugar, you get the highs, the lows, right? You're sleepy, this, that. So, just think about all these things. If you're going on vacation, do you want to set yourself up for the best possible vacation, or do you want to just, waste all that time and money you spent saving, planning, and getting on a plane? I'm just saying, it's amazing how these little things, like 2 donuts in the morning, can end up trashing your day when you really don't want them to. Pop-Tarts, another great example. I used to love Pop-Tarts. I may eat one again just to, for old time's sake, but, it's not something I'm going to go to the store and buy. And there's so many things like that, even bread. Like when I eat, 2 pieces of bread, I feel it. I feel way more impulsive. I feel way more sporadic, and then I get that crash, 4 to 6 hours later. There's things I can do to mitigate that, but even when I buy sandwiches, usually I cut it down to 1 piece of bread, or a lot of times I'll even just throw the bread away if it's like at an airport or something, and that's the only food available. But food, fasting, these are things I've learned, like I said, and these are things that have had a dramatic impact on my comfort traveling, on my everything traveling. It's had a huge impact. Probably one of the most significant impacts I've discovered, impactful things or practices or whatever, has been to control my food and to learn to fast. And once I got the fasting down, everything else just fell in line. Dropping sugar and carbs for an extended period of time, made another huge difference. It, took that volatility of my emotions away. So anyway, just some thoughts.